Okay, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the world of quantum light. But hold on, we're not talking about some distant sci-fi concept here.
Right, it's closer than you might think.
We're talking about harnessing the power of quantum mechanics with something you probably have in your living room right now. Fiber optic cables.
Those unassuming cables are actually more interesting than most people realize.
That's why we're doing this deep dive, right? To unravel these complex ideas.
Absolutely. And today's topic is a perfect example. We're looking at this paper, and even the title sounds like it's from the future. Let me see. Spatiospectral quantum state estimation of photon pairs from optical fiber using stimulated emission. Catchy, right?
Yeah, I think my brain needs a coffee break just from hearing that.
Don't worry, we'll break it down. In a nutshell, these researchers have found a way to create pairs of photons, those tiny packets of light, and control them in a way that's pretty mind-blowing.
So we're talking about more than just switching the light on and off here.
Way more. We're talking about manipulating light's properties, its color, its shape even, on a quantum level.
Hold on. Did you just say the shape of light?
You heard right. You see, when most people think of light, they think of, well, light, a beam traveling in a straight line. But light can actually behave like a wave. And just like waves on the ocean, light waves can have different shapes, or transverse modes, as they're called in the biz.
Okay, I can kind of picture that. So are they like forcing the light into different molds or something? How do you even control the shape of something as, well, formless as light?
That's where fiber optics come in. Imagine shining light through a pipe. The light can bounce around inside, creating these wave patterns, these transverse modes, depending on the shape and properties of the pipe itself.
And in this case, the pipe is actually a super thin fiber optic cable.
Exactly. These cables are incredibly good at manipulating light in this way. By carefully controlling the properties of the fiber and the light they shine into it, researchers can essentially shape the light waves that come out the other end.
That's wild. But what's the point of all this light shaping, you ask? Well, it turns out that these specially crafted light waves, these photon pairs, can carry a ton more information than your average beam of light.
It's like upgrading from a bicycle to a spaceship in terms of information density.
And that's where things get really interesting, because this technology has the potential to revolutionize everything from secure communication to, get this, even computing itself.
We're talking about the potential for things like unhackable messages and computers so powerful they could make today's supercomputers look like toys.
That's some next level stuff.
Nah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's unpack how they actually create and control these souped up photons in the first place. And it all starts with something called four-wave mixing.
Sounds complicated, right? But it's actually a really cool phenomenon that happens inside those fiber optic cables.
Hit us with the quantum physics.
So imagine you shine two photons of a very specific color into the fiber. Now, because of the unique properties of the fiber itself, these photons can actually interact with each other. And when they do, something amazing happens. They essentially combine their energy to create two brand new photons with different colors.
Wait, so they're like smashing these photons together and out pops a new pair with totally different properties.
It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's a decent way to think about it. And here's where it gets even cooler. The researchers found that by carefully selecting the colors of those initial photons they send in, they can actually control the shape, the transverse mode of the new photon pairs that come out.
Okay, hold on. They're controlling the shape of light with more light. That seems like taking the scenic route.
It might sound counterintuitive, but that's the beauty of it. They're basically using light to manipulate light, and this incredible level of control is what allows them to create these multidimensional photon pairs. And remember, more dimensions means way more information carrying capacity.
Okay, so they've managed to create these super photons. But how do they actually see what's going on at such a tiny scale? I mean, we're talking about the quantum world here. It's not like they can just stick a magnifying glass up to the fiber optic cable, right?
You're absolutely right. To study these photons, they need a completely different approach, and that's where this stimulated emission idea comes into play.
Okay, let's dive into that. What exactly is stimulated emission? It sounds kind of intense.
It's actually quite elegant. Imagine they want to study a specific type of photon pair with a certain color and shape combination. They can actually send in a third beam of light called a seed beam that perfectly matches those properties.
So it's like they're giving the whole system a little nudge in the right direction.
Exactly. The seed beam encourages the creation of more photon pairs that match its own characteristics, kind of like amplifying a weak signal.
So by carefully choosing the properties of that seed beam, they can essentially control Which types of photon pairs get created inside the fiber?
You got it. And by measuring the properties of the amplified photons that come out, they can start to unravel all the secrets of this four-wave mixing process.
This is blowing my mind. They're basically controlling the shape and color of light with more light, all inside a tiny fiber optic cable. It's like something straight out of Star Trek.
It really is remarkable, and it gets even more mind-boggling when we start talking about what they can do with these carefully crafted photon pairs. But I think we need to pause here for a moment to let our brains cool down a bit because we're just getting started.
Okay, so last time we left off with this incredible image of researchers essentially sculpting light inside fiber optic cables. But this time, I'm ready to go deeper, to unravel the biggest mystery of them all.
You must mean entanglement, then.
You read my mind. It's like the ultimate magic trick of the quantum world. Two particles, linked across any distance, change one, and the other changes instantly. How is that even possible?
You're not alone in asking that. Even Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. It's a phenomenon that still has physicists scratching their heads.
But the thing is, it's not just theoretical, right? We've actually seen entanglement in action.
Oh, absolutely. We've done experiments proving that entanglement is a very real, very measurable thing. But here's the kicker. We still don't fully understand how it works. And that's what makes it so fascinating.
It's like having a magic wand that actually works, but having no clue what makes it tick.
The perfect analogy.
Right.
But just because we don't fully understand it doesn't mean we can't use it. And that's what's so exciting about this research with entangled photons in fiber optics. It's opening doors to a whole new world of possibilities.
So let's talk about those possibilities. What can we actually do with entangled photons? Give me the good stuff.
Well, how about unhackable communication?
Now you're speaking my language. Okay, walk me through this.
Imagine a world where it's physically impossible for hackers to intercept your messages. That's the promise of quantum communication. Because of entanglement, any attempt to eavesdrop on a message would actually disturb the entangled photons, instantly alerting both the sender and the receiver.
Wait, so it's like a built-in alarm system that screams, hey, someone's listening.
Precisely. And because the act of eavesdropping itself disrupts the message, there's no way to steal information without being detected. It's the ultimate security protocol.
Okay, I'm sold. Sign me up for Quantum Internet 2.0. What else can these entangled photons do?
Fasten your seatbelt because we're about to enter the realm of quantum computing.
Quantum computers, huh?
Yeah.
They're like the rock stars of the science world. Everyone's talking about them, but I feel like I need a PhD just to understand the basics.
It is a complex field, for sure, but the basic idea is this. Imagine a computer so powerful that it could solve problems in minutes that would take even our most powerful supercomputers millions of years to crack. That's the potential of quantum computing.
Okay, now you're just messing with me. How is that even remotely possible?
It all comes down to the weird and wonderful world of quantum mechanics. You see, classical computers, the kind we use every day, they store information as bits, which can be either a 0 or a 1. But quantum computers use something called qubits, which can be a 0, a 1, or both at the same time. And that's where entanglement comes in. It allows these qubits to be linked together in a way that exponentially increases their computing power.
Okay, my brain is officially starting to melt. So we're talking about harnessing the power of entanglement to create computers that operate on a whole other level.
You got it. Quantum computers have the potential to revolutionize fields like medicine, materials science, artificial intelligence. We're talking about designing life-saving drugs, creating entirely new materials, understanding the universe in ways we never thought possible.
This is way bigger than just faster internet speeds. This is about fundamentally changing what's possible.
Absolutely. And this research with quantum light in optical fibers, it's not just some abstract theoretical pursuit. It's laying the groundwork for these very real, very world-changing technologies.
It's mind-blowing to think that something as simple as light zipping through a fiber optic cable could hold the key to unlocking this quantum future. But how do they actually control those entangled photons with such precision? We talked about stimulated emission earlier, but I feel like we just scratched the surface.
You're right, there's a lot more to uncover. Remember how we talked about the researchers sending in that seed beam of light to stimulate the creation of specific photon pairs?
Yeah, it's like they're whispering instructions to those photons, telling them exactly what to do.
And those whispers, they come in the form of very precise control over the seed beam's properties, not just its color, but its shape too. That transverse mode we talked about earlier.
So it's like they're fine-tuning the seed beam to perfectly match the entangled photons they want to create, almost like tuning a radio to the right frequency.
A great analogy. And here's where it gets even more impressive. You see, there isn't just one way for these photons to interact inside the fiber. Remember that four-wave mixing process? It turns out there are multiple ways that can occur, depending on the properties of the photons involved. Think of it like a recipe book with different variations on the same dish.
Okay, so it's not just about combining photons, but about doing it in just the right way to get the desired outcome.
Exactly. And that's where the seed beam comes in. By carefully tuning its properties, they can target and amplify the specific four-wave mixing process they're interested in, while minimizing the ones that create unwanted outcomes.
So they're like culinary masters, carefully selecting the right ingredients and techniques to create the perfect quantum meal.
Love that analogy. And by analyzing the light that comes out of the fiber, they can actually see how those different recipes are playing out.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
But with a process this delicate, there have to be challenges, right? I mean, we're talking about controlling something as fundamental as light at the quantum level. What could possibly go wrong?
All right, so we've talked about this incredible potential, sending secret messages with light, even cracking impossible problems with quantum computers. But it sounds like even the most basic fiber optic cable, it's not exactly a walk in the park.
You're right to point that out. And one of the biggest hurdles is actually something we've already touched on: perfect entanglement. It's a lot trickier than it sounds.
Yeah, we talked about those little imperfections, those distinguishabilities that can mess things up. But it's hard to even imagine things being that precise when you're dealing with, like, individual particles of light.
And that's exactly where the challenge lies. Even the tiniest difference between those entangled photons can throw things off. We're talking about things like minuscule variations in their color, their polarization, which is like the direction they're wiggling, or even the exact moment they arrive at a detector. So it's like trying to make two things identical down to the atomic level. No wonder it's so tough.
A very apt comparison. And just like with any complex system, the more moving parts you have, the harder it is to keep everything perfectly in sync. And remember, we're dealing with multiple four-wave mixing processes happening inside that fiber, each with its own quirks and potential for introducing those pesky distinguishabilities.
It's starting to sound less like herding cats and more like herding quantum fleas or something. So how on earth are researchers trying to wrangle these things?
Well, they're not giving up, that's for sure. One promising approach is to double down on precision, making that seed beam we talked about earlier even more exact.
So even finer control over the color and shape of that initial beam of light?
Exactly. The idea is that by really fine-tuning the properties of that seed beam, they can more selectively target and amplify the specific four-wave mixing processes they want, while minimizing the ones that create those unwanted distinguishabilities.
Like a microscopic game of laser tag, picking off the right processes with incredible accuracy.
That's a great way to put it. Another strategy is to get creative with the fiber optics themselves. It's not just about the light, but also the environment it's traveling through.
So it's like designing a better racetrack for those photons to zip around in.
Exactly. Researchers are constantly experimenting with new materials, new shapes, new ways to structure those fibers at a microscopic level to optimize those four-wave mixing processes and squeeze out every last bit of entanglement they can.
It's like they're alchemists, tinkering with the very fabric of the fiber to unlock its hidden quantum potential.
I like that analogy. It really does capture the spirit of exploration and ingenuity that drives this field.
Okay, so we've got those pesky distinguishabilities to contend with.
Mm.
Are there any other challenges researchers are facing in this quantum fiber optic rodeo?
Well, on top of everything else, we have to remember that light itself isn't always well behaved. As much as we like to think of it as this pure, ethereal thing, the reality is that it interacts with its environment, and that can cause some hiccups.
Okay, you're going to have to elaborate on that one. What kind of hiccups are we talking about?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is something we call loss. As light travels through the fiber, even the highest quality fiber, some of it inevitably gets absorbed or scattered away.
So it's like the signal gets weaker over distance, kind of like how a sound wave gets fainter the farther it travels from its source.
Exactly. And while this loss might be negligible for things like watching Netflix or, browsing the internet, it can be a real headache when you're dealing with these incredibly delicate quantum states. Even a small amount of loss can degrade those entangled photon pairs and throw off your calculations.
So how do researchers try to combat this loss? Do they just crank up the power on the light source?
That's actually not a bad thought, but it's not always that simple. Sometimes adding more power can actually introduce more noise and instability into the system. One approach is to use shorter fibers, since, as we talked about, shorter distances mean less opportunity for loss to occur. But of course, that limits how much manipulation and control they can do with the light before it's gone.
So it's a constant balancing act, trying to squeeze as much performance out of those fibers as possible while minimizing those pesky losses.
Exactly. It's a game of chess, constantly adapting and refining your strategies to stay one step ahead. And despite all these challenges, what researchers have been able to achieve with quantum light and fiber optics is truly remarkable. It's a testament to their ingenuity and persistence.
It really is mind-blowing stuff. We've gone from the basics of light and fiber optics all the way to the edge of what's possible with quantum technology. And it's clear that while there are still hurdles to overcome, the potential rewards, they're just massive. I mean, we're talking about potentially revolutionizing communication, computation, even our understanding of the universe itself.
And the thing is, this is just the beginning. We're really just scratching the surface of what's possible with quantum technology. And who knows what incredible breakthroughs await us just around the corner.
Well said. It just goes to show sometimes the most groundbreaking discoveries come from the most unexpected places. So to our listeners, next time you're streaming a movie or scrolling through your phone, take a moment to appreciate those humble fiber optic cables, because they might just hold the key to unlocking a future we can only begin to imagine.
Absolutely. The quantum future is out there, and it's closer than you might think.